So I thought it might be worth reviewing the Lost Judgment DLC just because no one else has really done that to my knowledge. I'm sure if you look around you'll find plenty of information on what it adds. Mostly this new fighting style, which is actually a lot of fun and works quite well for others, in fact. Like, it doesn't feel at all unbalanced. All the styles are actually goddamn fun and maybe a little too overpowered in some regards. But you can kind of weave the boxing in very well with the other three styles. So yeah, that's probably the big thing of the DLC. Of course, the main thing of the DLC isn't what's in it, but is the fact that it is in fact DLC, and it's hard not to come to the conclusion that this stuff was held back to sell just to make a little more money, basically, to kind of win people over to that new Kaito expansion, which is promised to come up. And it's that old few of not quite dead. So this is one of those heat actions I don't think they should have had in there. It's just way too easy to use. Respect Yakuza 6, it went and did away with a lot of that type of thing. Nevertheless, I still come out on top. Point is, it's very obvious when you play it that this is a case of taking some stuff which was probably, it was either finished for launch or was in the case of, or was maybe near finished. You know, stuff goes to the printer at different times, so yeah, all this stuff could have just not quite been ready. It's still sort of dubious. Like, we all know the situation going down here. We know they probably wanted to have something to get people on with the season pass. So really, the whole thing really comes down to how good is that Kaito DLC gonna be? You know, will it justify the price of most of this stuff? Because stuff like the boxing, like I said, it's a fun style, but it's also something which is very obviously meant to be something you would have probably earned via the boxing minigame. Like, if you go in here, and I'm pretty sure it trigger a cutscene, so I'm not going to bother, but if you go in here, play the boxing minigame, you've got a whole technique tree, which also unlocks these. As you can see, these only cost 100, most of them. That's because you unlock them via a separate sort of boxing unlock system, and then they only cost 100 to get. So it's kind of a technique you earn by playing the minigame and fighting all these different boxers. Like, each of them is usually done by beating a different boxer. Apart from these more expensive ones, or pick up this one, which are, you know, exclusively for use when roaming around the city. But yeah, we all sort of that's the boxing DLC covered, so let's talk about the rest of it. The main other thing is, and I was surprised how big this is because I wasn't too concerned, but the dating stuff isn't just a dating thing, it's multiple side missions, and these are good side missions, some of them. Like, for example, you see this one, it's a full-on sequel to what were they called? The Pervert 3, Hentai 4, whatever you call them. You remember that from the first Judgment? These bunch of guys you had to track down? You know, it's a sequel mission to that. You get to travel back to an area from the first game you otherwise wouldn't have. It wraps up some storylines. It's a pretty goddamn good side mission. 12 of those. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the best one. As you can see, I haven't actually done that many of them, but they're decent enough. Why I Don the Costume is a fun one. It's basically you dressing up as a mascot character and going around sort of helping out. You got some comedic bits. And these are decent. It was a decent length mission also. Point is, for dating DLC, I was never big on the Yakuza's dating, and while I say Lost Judgment kind of improved it for me, this is worth getting more because of the missions. Like, you'll want this because it is new story content. This is new missions to play. But it does make it sort of, once again, very obvious that this stuff was probably intended to be in the game. day one. And I'll give you my evidence for this. It's quite easy to see. I just go to, let me just dig out my my mission tracker. This is a bit weird because we've got like 4 mission trackers. All of these for task, case files, school diaries, town goal, all ways to track your different missions. But we go into case files. Date otherwise only has a single entry. That's the top one, but one I haven't got because it requires you to do this whole bar drinking minigame I'm not really too bothered with. So yeah, if you don't have the DLC, well, this exists for one date. And let me give you some more evidence of this conclusion I've came to. Let's head back to Camarocho. And while I'm here, I guess I'll talk about some of the critical response to this game. My opinion is that it's very good, but I felt I might as well talk about Polygon, because why not? I'm not really. I feel like I'm tired. I'm not interested in complaining about Polygon. They don't even give scores, so I can't say, oh, they said something was bad because it was too morally complex or whatever. I'm upset. I'm like, well, they didn't even score it, so who cares? As you know, Lost Judgment, if you haven't heard, has what you might call, some would say problematic, others would say edgy, others would say adult context. It doesn't really matter. And let me just give you my evidence of it. See, this mission board, if you don't have the DLC, there's literally just this single mission here. This board in Yagumi's office exists to offer you a single case. Otherwise, yeah, you get less talk about perverts, which is, as I said, a sequel to our Groper track down missions from the first game, and it's actually a pretty long and pretty neat mission with multiple things going on. Bit of a disappointing boss fight at the end, but oh wow. So on that topic, as you can tell, that features adult jokes, you might say, or you might say it features a joke where, like, our boy Yagami here gets, like, sexually assaulted by a bunch of guys in like rabbit costumes. That happens. And it's played for laughs. This isn't what people are upset about. This isn't what Polygon and Eurogame and these things have sort of brought up. What their issue is really that the game goes into some fairly dark places. I'd say it's a bit like the Ground Zeroes thing. Like, if you thought, oh, it's just, if you know the basic plot just from a synopsis of what's happening, it involves a train groping. That's not really a big deal. Like, that's not the big thing. It's more gets a bit darker. Gets a bit a scene is a lot. You get a scene which is a lot more graphic. And is, it's full on, like I said, it's a bit like Ground Zeroes in that you see more than Ground Zeroes. It's not anyone shoving a bomb up a woman's pussy, so it's not Ground Zeroes level of disturbing in terms of what's implied. But what is shown is probably the thing which people are upset about. And I think what people get upset about is that it's here along with, like, what if Yagami got assaulted by guys in rabbit costumes as a gag. It's the same with stuff like you'll have lines where it's like this girl is like dating some older gangster type for money, and you've got like lines about him sending her threats like, hey bitch, I'm gonna track you down and I'm gonna fucking rape you and strangle you. And you have that, and then you will have in that mission I just mentioned that's in the DLC, like a gag with like a teenage prostitute in like a schoolgirl outfit, and the gag is that her clients want her to just lay on the floor so that she can walk over them, so they can pretend they're like in the gutter trying to look up schoolgirls' shirts, and all played for comedy. So I think that's kind of what people get a bit weird about, I guess. I should be obvious, I don't mind this stuff. I've always this has always been part of the series. I wouldn't say it's always been part of the series' identity, weirdly, because I think the comedy stuff came more later. It was almost the other way around. Like, people forget the very first Yakuza started with a murder caused by an attempted rape. Isn't new territory. Lost Judgment just has a scene which is a bit isn't like background talk of something which has happened, and it's just something that is actually shown, shown with some obscuring angles. That's how I'd put it. Yeah, I can't really. I don't really feel like complain about people who don't like this stuff or get upset about it in a way, because, like I said, Polygon isn't scoring this thing. I know some others that I think Game Informer was the one which got incredibly upset because of it doesn't treat sexual assault appropriately or whatever. I'm not really. I'm sort of like I get more mad where people complain about Chappelle, not people who just don't like his sets, but people who are like, oh, he sold out, he used to be standing against white supremacy and now he's standing up for the patriarchy. And it's like, you would be incredibly upset about all these people if they just did their old stuff. You just have to retroactively pretend, these new guys, not these new guys, this new material, some of which is actually reused. Like, if there's one thing I will say about Sticks and Stones I think is a little weak, it's that some of it are like old Michael Jackson jokes. And I've seen you do that before, Dave. This isn't new material. Sure, it's some new material, but the core things, stuff I've seen you do like 10, 15 years back. No, it doesn't. I don't feel like it doesn't feel like someone trying to retroactively pretend something it's not. I mean, on that Chappelle special, I will say, closer was him doubling down to a point where I'm like, Jesus, Dave, do you have something other than LGBT jokes to do? But I wasn't like, oh my god, this stuff is so below him. How can he do that? So that's the thing with Lost Judgment. It's got some stuff which is a bit darker than the series has gone of late, but it's, and it's still doing its whole, goofy, schlocky sort of comedy routine. I found it a hell of a less. Certainly didn't find it obnoxious in the same way Like a Dragon's tones could contrast at points. Like, here's the thing about Like a Dragon. I think as an actual main story, it's a lot better than what I've played of Lost Judgment. But I'm also going to say that as a main story, Lost Judgment side stuff doesn't feel like it ever horribly gets in the way of what it's trying to say. Like a Dragon seems to have this quite sincere attempt to be a kind of underdog story with sort of some genuine themes about poverty and stuff like that, and it's got like a full-on like Ichiban going like doing a full-on pull yourself up by your bootstraps speech to like some homeless guys, and it mostly being just to point out that Ichiban is kind of dumb, as then it has like a horrible 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour, however fucking long it takes to clear mini game about you becoming like a billionaire, which is just comedically. I wouldn't mind it so much if it didn't feel like a lot of RPGs. This isn't a Western thing, it's not a Japanese thing, it's just RPGs in general. It's like I'd like it better if it didn't feel like it was like hours and hours of testing whether I knew really basic maths. But that's something I'll say about action combat. You can fuck up action combat because you just don't react correctly. With an RPG at a point, I'm like, can I just have an algorithm clear all this shit for me? Because it's not really... my victory is assured by the simple fact that I've worked out a very simple mathematical equation to beat a huge chunk of this game. I think that's where, was it Final Fantasy XII which did that, where it let you just almost program what people would do in certain situations, and there's the case that, oh, this is genius, but then there's the case that actually this kind of exposes that certain chunks of this game you could just skip through and you wouldn't really lose anything on a gameplay front. Anyway, that's how I feel about the contrast in tones. So let's go back to the DLC. Let me complain about the one thing I really do dislike outside of the fact that, yeah, I do feel like this is definitely a case of trying to squeeze a bit more cash out. Like, I really hope that Kaito DLC makes me go, whoa, that was worth £29. I hope it does. and that some of these items are really terrible. You get a bunch of DLC items. Some are cosmetics. You can change the skin of your dog, which I think is kind of goofy when you can still unlock all these costumes, but you barely ever use them. Like, seriously, I've spent out like 30 hours with this game, and I've like switched into a costume a couple of, like, maybe 2 or 3 times. And, never had a need for most of these, and like I said, there's rarely any instances where you even get to choose which one you use, so why have all these unlockable costumes which you can't use even when roaming the city? But you can dress up your dog, and they've added some costumes for you to dance in, so it's just weird. I don't know, maybe that's a weird actor contract thing, who knows. So there's that. Which I just bring up because of DLC cosmetics. But the thing aside from the cosmetics is stuff like optional drones and bikes and motorbikes and a robot. Most of this stuff is awful and don't use it. Here's the issue. You see this? I got the Sky Spider, and it is just better in every way. You get this at the start if you get the DLC. As you can see, it's got way better durability, a higher limit to how many items you can equip it with, and it basically just breaks every drone related mission, so don't use it. It's a cheat item, don't use it. Okay, what about the skateboard? Well, they've given you a hoverboard, and what is it? Well, this one's modified for maximum speed, this one's got tighter steering, and this one is amazing acceleration and maximum speed. So it just makes my high speed one useless, so I might as well just use that. So I'm like, no, it's a cheat item, I'm not going to use it. And what's the robot like, which you got, which I can't actually show you because that would require me to travel all the way to the school, and that would add some time to this ramble, but it's the same thing. It's like, oh, it's just a really good item which takes the fun of unlocking new stuff and actually having to choose between different devices which might have different benefits. Like you can get a really fast drone in this. Same speed as the Sky Spider I got with the DLC, but unlike the Sky Spider, it's got terrible defense. It crashes, it burns. Sky Spider doesn't have that problem, so you might as well just use it. So don't use it, it's a cheat. Have the fun of actually having to strategically pick out what drone you're going to use. The only one I don't mind is this, which is this motorbike. And that's because it's just obscenely costly to upgrade. Like, if you really want to, you can spend a ton of money. Like, that would be almost all my money just for that single upgrade. So, it's actually almost more beneficial to try out these other ones, which aren't as good, but, they actually are quite easy to upgrade. So there's a sacrifice. Like, if you really want to put tons of money into your motorbikes and have the best one possible, you can invest in the DLC motorbike. But if you maybe aren't so concerned, it might be better off for you to stick with different unlockable ones. So I think that's like the only DLC, I guess I'd say cheat items I'm going to call them, that doesn't annoy me. That's kind of a problem with the DLC. You can't like pick out, let's have just the missions, just the dates, just the combat style, maybe the new motorbike track and the new skate park. No, you gotta have it all. So you get those cheat items also, which are best just ignored, just don't use them. I think that's about it for the DLC, really. You get some additional boxing matches, which are cool. They kind of give you, they're unlockable from the start, although once again in that classic, I think this was intended to be in the main game. It's interesting to note that the boxers who you can box who are in the DLC are affected by how far you are through in the story. So if you haven't met someone, you can't box them in the gym yet, even though you got them as part of the DLC, which once again is like, oh yeah, this is probably because these were at one point intended to just be in there. There's some ROMs, which is cool. You can play the Mega Drive in Yagmi's office. They've got 4 extra Mega Drive games. I want to praise the Mega Drive stuff because they not Mega Drive Master System, because they did a very good job of it. First of all, they've actually tweaked some of the games to work better on a modern analog. Like you've got like you know, about one of those Pong block breaker games. What's it called? Is it Arkanoid or whatever they call them? Yeah, whatever this one's called, I forget. And they've actually modified it so the speed is affected by how far you push the analog stick, which, yeah, it impresses me. They've got Japanese and English versions, which is good because in some cases those Mega Drive Master System games have less content on the English language version. It's an interesting bit of trivia, but a lot of the time the English language cartridges had less data, so they would actually cut whole stages. So there's a reason to sometimes play the Japanese versions. So yeah, praise be for the how well they've handled the Master System emulator. They've gone beyond what they needed to, which was really just to dump some ROMs. People would have been happy, but they actually did go out and offer and make some little tweaks here and there to make them work better. And I'm just going to beat up these school kids, and I think then I'm done. I think I've given my opinion, which is mostly focused on the DLC and the content controversy. Let's just do this. I really like this move, break their guard and just go in. So these are the kind of heat actions I like, where you've got to earn them. Like, not stuff where you just kick a guy when he's on the ground, where you've got to kind of like do something cool, like, oh, let's see if hey, what's he like? Oh, you come here, I want to shove you against a pole and throw you into people. Oh, gotta beat up my heat, deal with my heat first. There we go. Oh, there you go, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, that's 3 in 1. 3 troublesome students, 3 teenagers just beating the fuck out of, and that's one of the traits I do really enjoy about this game. Bye.